The transport shuttle rattled as it crossed into the diplomatic zone. Ryan pressed his palm against the cold window and watched the Harrow station grow larger against the black void. 12 years in Earth's military had taught him to trust his eyes before any scanner. Now he served as security on the Meridian, a council ship carrying representatives from species he still struggled to pronounce. Around him, the other security officers checked their equipment with practiced efficiency. Talus, a crystalline being from Sector 9, hummed as energy patterns danced across his transparent body. Beside him, Oren from the water worlds adjusted filters on her breathing apparatus. They were professionals, veterans of 100 diplomatic missions. Ryan was the newcomer, the primitive addition Earth's admission to the galactic community had required. Weapons to standby mode, Commander Talus announced, his voice like wind chimes. Standard diplomatic protocol. Ryan's hand moved to his sidearm, but hesitated. Through the viewport, the Harrow station rotated slowly. It looked organic, like something grown rather than built. Ridges and valleys covered its surface in patterns that reminded him of coral reefs back home. But something about its movement bothered him. Is that normal? Ryan asked, pointing to a section of the station that seemed to twitch irregularly. Talus glanced at his display panel. All readings are within acceptable parameters. The Harrow build living stations. Movement is expected. Right. Ryan watched the twitch repeat. It didn't feel natural. It felt wrong, like watching someone breathe too fast or too shallow. He'd seen that kind of movement before, in wounded animals trying to hide their pain. Oren turned her large eyes toward him. You seem concerned, human. The Harrow have maintained peaceful relations for 6 centuries. This is a routine negotiation. Ryan nodded, but didn't look away from the station. Back in basic training, his instructor had shown footage of soldiers who ignored their instincts because computers said everything was fine. Most of those soldiers didn't make a home. The galaxy might have better technology than Earth, but Ryan doubted it had better survival instincts than 4 million years of human evolution. The shuttle docked with a gentle thump. Diplomats from 12 species gathered near the airlock, their translators buzzing with pre-meeting chatter. Ryan took his position near the rear, scanning faces and body language. Ambassador Chun represented Earth, a sharp woman who'd made it clear she expected Ryan to blend into the background. Remember, Commander Talus said to the security team, we are guests. The Harrow are sensitive to aggressive displays. Weapons remain holstered unless I give direct authorization. The other officers acknowledged the order. Ryan stayed quiet, his attention fixed on a monitor showing the Harrow station's docking bay. Figures moved in the shadows beyond the airlock. They should have been clearly visible under the bay's lighting, but something about the contrast seemed off. The airlock pressurized with a hiss. Green lights indicated atmosphere compatibility. The Harrow appeared on the communication screen, tall and elegant with skin that shifted between blue and purple. Their spokesperson bowed gracefully. Welcome, honored council members. We await your arrival with great anticipation. The words were polite. The tone was correct. But Ryan caught something in the Harrow's eyes, a quick dart to the left, then back. Fear. He'd seen that look in the eyes of informants working under duress, people saying one thing while their bodies screamed another. Did you see that? Ryan whispered to Oren. See what? The way the speaker looked. Like they're being watched. Oren checked her scanner. I detect only Harrow life signs. Your concern is noted, but appears unfounded. The airlock door began to open. Ryan's pulse quickened. Every instinct he possessed told him something was wrong. The station's irregular movements. The shadows that were too dark. The fear in the Harrow spokesperson's eyes. Pieces of a puzzle he couldn't quite assemble. Commander, Ryan said, voice low. Request permission to keep my weapon active. Talus's crystalline form flashed red, a sign of irritation. Denied. You will follow protocol, Officer Ryan. Your species may be new to diplomatic procedure, but you will learn. The door opened fully. 5 Harrows stood in the docking bay, arms spread in greeting. They wore ceremonial robes that flowed like water. Behind them, the bay stretched into darkness despite what should have been adequate lighting. Ryan's eyes struggled to focus on that darkness. It seemed to move, to breathe. Ambassador Chun stepped forward with her delegation. Ryan moved with them, hand resting on his holstered weapon. The Harrow smiled and beckoned them closer. Their movements were graceful but stiff, like dancers who'd forgotten they were performing. Point one of the Harrow, a female with elaborate markings on her face, made eye contact with Ryan. Her smile never wavered, but her pupils dilated. Her breathing quickened. She was terrified, and she was trying to tell him something. That Ryan's training kicked in. He'd done hostage extractions in Yemen and corporate rescues in Jakarta. He knew what fear looked like when someone couldn't speak it aloud. The Harrow weren't greeting them. They were warning them. His hand closed around his weapon's grip. "Officer Ryan," Talus warned. "Stand down." But Ryan wasn't looking at Talus. He was looking at the darkness behind the Harrow delegation. The shadows that moved wrong. The empty space that somehow felt full. His scanner showed nothing, but his eyes caught a shimmer, like heat waves rising from summer asphalt. Something was there. Something hungry. And the Harrow knew it. Ryan's grandfather had been a hunter in Montana. He'd taught Ryan to read tracks in snow, to understand how animals moved when they were healthy versus when they were sick or scared. One lesson stuck with him more than others. Prey animals know when predators are near, even if they can't see them. The Harrow were prey right now. "Everything is prepared for your comfort," the lead Harrow said. Her name translated as something close to wisteria. She gestured toward the station's interior with movements that were too controlled, too measured. "Please, follow us to the negotiation chamber." Ambassador Chen smiled and began walking forward. The other diplomats followed, chattering about the beautiful architecture and the honor of finally meeting the Harrow face to face. Ryan counted steps, measured distances, watched angles. The Harrow delegates positioned themselves in a loose formation that looked welcoming but felt protective. They were creating a barrier with their own bodies. Commander Talus walked beside Ryan, his crystalline structure refracting the bay's dim lights. "Your heart rate is elevated, human. Medical concern, or simply your species' usual anxiety?" "Something's wrong here," Ryan said quietly. "Look at how they're standing. Military formations disguised as greeting parties. You see threats where there are none. A common failing in young species. You will learn to trust diplomatic protocols and verified sensor data." Ryan wanted to argue, but bit his tongue. He'd been dismissed enough times today. Instead, he focused on what his eyes told him. The Harrow Station's walls pulsed with bioluminescence, creating patterns that should have been beautiful. But the rhythm was off, stuttering in places like a heartbeat under stress. Wisteria led them down a corridor that curved gently upward. Oren commented on the unique architecture. Talus scanned for security threats and found none. The diplomats discussed trade agreements and cultural exchanges. Ryan watched the walls breathe wrong. "How long have you maintained this station?" Ambassador Chen asked. "3 generations," Wisteria replied. "It grows with us, adapts to our needs. We are bonded to it, and it to us." Her words were proud, but her voice carried an undertone Ryan recognized. Grief. She was mourning something. They reached a large chamber with a circular table grown from the same organic material as the station. Seats emerged from the floor, customized for each species' physiology. Refreshments waited on the table, and viewing screens displayed star charts relevant to the negotiations. Perfect. Too perfect. Ryan positioned himself against the wall where he could see all entrances. The other security officers spread out according to standard procedure. The diplomats settled into their seats and began formal introductions. Everything proceeded exactly as it should, except for the way Wisteria's hand trembled when she reached for her glass, except for how another Harrow's eyes kept darting to the ceiling, except for the shadow in the corner that didn't match any light source Ryan could identify. He activated a scanner and pointed it at the shadow. The readout showed empty space. He looked with his eyes and saw movement, like oil spreading across water. His gut twisted with the same feeling he'd had in Kandahar when his patrol walked into an ambush zone. Every alarm in his head screamed danger, but the technology said everything was fine. Ryan had learned to trust his head over machines. "Commander," he whispered into his comm, "I need permission to investigate an anomaly." "Negative. Remain at your post. Scanners show no threats." The diplomatic talks began. Ambassador Chen outlined Earth's proposal for cultural exchange programs. A delegate from the water worlds discussed resource sharing. The hero listened and responded appropriately, but Ryan noticed how they angled their bodies, always keeping the diplomats between themselves and that dark corner that he'd seen this behavior before. Villagers in contested territories who smiled at soldiers during the day, while fighters hid in cellars below. People who cooperated while being held at gunpoint. Compliance under duress. The hero weren't hosts. They were hostages. Ryan moved slowly along the wall, circling closer to the suspicious corner. Talus shot him a warning glance, but Ryan ignored it. His hand rested on his weapon, still holstered but ready. 3 meters from the shadow. 2 meters. The darkness seemed to pulse like something alive. 0.1 meter. The air felt wrong here, heavier somehow. Colder. His scanner insisted nothing was there, but Ryan's skin prickled with the awareness of being watched. He'd felt this in the Hindu Kush moments before enemy contact. The universe's way of warning prey that predators were near. He looked directly at the shadow and thought he saw something look back. Officer Ryan, return to your designated position immediately. Talus commanded through the comm. Ryan took another step. The shadow rippled. Just for a second, he saw an outline. Something massive. Something with too many limbs and a shape that hurt to perceive. It was gone, just darkness again, but he'd seen it. We have a hostile, Ryan said into his comm. Negative. Scanners detect no life forms except those present for the negotiations. Your scanners are wrong. The diplomats paused their discussion. Ambassador Chun looked at Ryan with an expression that promised a serious conversation later about appropriate behavior. Wisteria's face went pale, her skin shifting to a sickly gray color. She knew what Ryan had seen. Perhaps Officer Ryan requires rest, Talus suggested, his tone making it clear this was an order disguised as concern. The transition to off-world duty can be overwhelming for humans. Ryan met Wisteria's eyes across the room. She gave the smallest shake of her head. A warning. Not yet. Not here. But her eyes said something else too. Thank you for seeing what they cannot. Ryan forced himself to step back from the shadow. Every muscle in his body fought the retreat, but causing a diplomatic incident wouldn't help anyone. He returned to his position against the wall, though his eyes never left that corner. The darkness there seemed satisfied, settling into stillness like a cat that had successfully intimidated a dog. The negotiations continued for another hour. Trade routes, technology exchanges, cultural programs. The hero agreed to everything too quickly, accepting terms that clearly favored the council. Ambassador Chen looked pleased. The other diplomats congratulated themselves on a successful first meeting. Ryan watched Wisteria and her people growing paler as the minutes passed. Finally, Talus called for a recess. The diplomats would return to the Meridian for the evening and resume talks tomorrow. Standard procedure. Give both sides time to review proposals and prepare counteroffers. Everyone stood and exchanged polite farewells as they filed toward the exit. Ryan maneuvered closer to Wisteria. She stiffened when he approached, but didn't move away. How long have they been here? He whispered. Her eyes widened. For a moment, he thought she might deny everything. Then her shoulders sagged with something like relief. 19 days, she breathed. We tried to warn the council. They killed our communications engineer. Made it look like an accident. How many? We don't know. They hide. Our sensors can't detect them. They're supposed to be extinct. What are they? Renders. Parasites from the old wars. They feed on neural tissue. They've been using us as bait. Ryan's blood went cold. For the council members. Wisteria nodded. The moment you're all inside, they'll seal the station. Everyone dies. Everyone becomes food. Officer Ryan, Talus called. We are departing. Ryan looked at the diplomats heading toward the airlock. 12 species, dozens of representatives. Walking into a trap his scanner couldn't see. I'm telling the commander, Ryan said. He won't believe you. They fooled every sensor sweep. You said it yourself. They told you nothing was wrong. She was right. Ryan could already hear Talus's response. Scanner data over human paranoia. Evidence over instinct. By the time anyone believed him, it would be too late. the diplomats reached the airlock. Ambassador Chen thanked Wisteria for her hospitality. The Harrow delegation bowed gracefully, their fear hidden behind practiced courtesy. The first diplomats stepped through the airlock back onto the shuttle. Ryan made his decision that he drew his weapon. Everyone stop. His voice cut through the polite chatter like a gunshot. Get back from the airlock. Now. Chaos erupted instantly. Diplomats froze. Talus spun toward Ryan, his crystalline body flashing red with anger. Orin raised her own weapon, pointing it at Ryan rather than any threat. Stand down immediately, Talus commanded. This is a direct order. There are hostiles in this station, Ryan said, keeping his weapon lowered but ready. Invisible to our scanners. The Harrow are under duress. Ambassador Chen's face turned red. What the hell do you think you're doing? My job. Protecting you. By threatening our hosts? By sabotaging months of diplomatic groundwork. They're not our hosts. They're prisoners. And we're the next meal. Wisteria took a step forward. Ryan saw the conflict in her eyes. She could back him up, confirm everything he'd said. But that would trigger the attack early. The Renders would kill everyone immediately rather than risk their trap failing. Officer Ryan, she said carefully, I appreciate your vigilance, but I assure you there are no threats here. The words crushed him. She'd sacrificed her own people's chance at rescue to buy time. But time for what? They were all still trapped. You're done, Talus said. Orin escorted him back to the shuttle. He'll face disciplinary review for this behavior. Ryan's mind raced. He could let them arrest him, but that left everyone vulnerable. He could fight, but that definitely ended his career and helped no one. Or he could trust the instinct that had kept him alive through 3 tours and a dozen firefights. Trust what millions of years of evolution taught you to see that he looked at the shadows again. This time he didn't try to find a shape. He looked for the spaces where shadows shouldn't exist. The places where light bent wrong. The dark spots that moved when nothing else did. There behind the Harrow delegates. A ripple in the air like heat shimmer. His scanner showed empty space, but his eyes saw something massive, uncloaking just enough to move. It was positioning itself between the diplomats and the exit. Last chance, Talus said. Holster your weapon. Ryan watched the shimmer slide closer to the unsuspecting diplomats. Once it was in position, the trap would spring. The airlock would seal. The Renders would feast. And every sensor in the galaxy would record the deaths as an unfortunate accident because they couldn't see what was really there. Not today. Ryan raised his weapon and fired 3 times into the empty air behind the Harrow delegates. The galaxy exploded into screaming. The shots hit something solid. Something that shrieked with a sound that bypassed Ryan's ears and stabbed directly into his brain. The shimmer became solid, became real, became a nightmare of chitin and teeth and too many eyes. It was bigger than anything that should move that quietly. Its body dissolved the space it occupied, reality seeming to bend around it, a render. And it was dying. But behind it, the shadows stopped pretending to be empty. The Harrow delegates dropped to the floor without hesitation. They'd been waiting for this moment, hoping someone would finally see what their captors had hidden. More Renders decloaked throughout the chamber, their bodies materializing from nothing like ghosts becoming solid. 6, 10, 20. They filled the space with their impossible mass. Things that shouldn't exist, but did. Talus's crystalline body flash through a dozen colors Ryan had never seen before. Probably their equivalent of swearing. Defensive positions. The commander's voice cut through the screaming diplomats. All personnel, weapons hot. The security team responded with trained precision despite their shock. Orin's weapon hummed to life, firing energy bursts at the nearest Render. The shots passed through it like it wasn't there. The creature lunged forward and Orin barely rolled aside, her breathing apparatus cracking against the floor. Energy weapons are ineffective, Talus announced, firing his own weapon with the same results. Fall back to the shuttle. Ryan fired again, conventional bullets rather than energy. His rounds punched into a Render's carapace, and it screamed, black ichor spraying from the wounds. The creature stumbled, but didn't fall. Another Render scuttled toward the diplomats, and Ryan put 3 rounds into its cluster of eyes. It collapsed, twitching. Projectile weapons only, Ryan shouted. Solid ammunition. But most of the security team carried energy weapons. Standard issue for diplomatic missions because they were considered more precise, less messy. Perfect for every threat the galaxy had faced in the last 1,000 years. Useless against something evolution designed to be invisible to their technology. A render grabbed one of the Waterworld diplomats and lifted him like a toy. Ryan aimed, but couldn't get a clear shot with the alien thrashing in the creature's grip. The render's mandibles opened, revealing layers of teeth designed to bore into skulls and extract brain tissue. The diplomat's screams turned liquid. Wisteria threw herself at the render, driving a ceremonial blade into its thorax. The creature dropped its victim and turned on her. Ryan fired, walked his shots up the thing's spine until it collapsed. Wisteria caught the injured diplomat and dragged him toward cover behind the conference table. How do we fight them? Talus demanded, smashing his crystalline fists into a render's head. The impacts shattered parts of his own body, but the creature reeled backward. You can't see them with sensors, Ryan said, firing at another render that was trying to flank Orin. So stop looking at your scanners. Use your eyes. Look for where the air moves wrong, where shadows don't match the light. That's primitive nonsense. It's how humans hunted mammoths. Ryan ejected his empty magazine and slammed in a fresh one. We didn't have sensors. We had observation, pattern recognition. Trust what evolution gave you. A render dropped from the ceiling onto Ambassador Chun. Ryan spun and fired, but the angle was bad. His shots went wide. The creature's limbs wrapped around the ambassador and began squeezing. Ryan charged forward and jammed his weapon against what he hoped was the thing's brain cluster. He emptied half a magazine point blank. The render's grip released. Ambassador Chun fell, gasping and bleeding but alive. Fall back, Talus ordered again, fighting retreat to the shuttle. The security team began withdrawing, firing as they went. The renders pressed their advantage, scuttling across walls and sealing with movements that defied physics. More diplomats fell. A representative from the crystal colonies shattered under a render's claws. One of the floating gas beings popped like a balloon. Ryan grabbed Ambassador Chun and hauled her toward the exit. Orin covered their retreat, having switched to a backup weapon that fired physical darts. Talus smashed his way through 2 renders, leaving fragments of his own body scattered across the floor. They reached the corridor. The way back to the shuttle stretched ahead, but more renders blocked the path. They'd been waiting for this, herding their prey toward a kill zone. Ryan counted at least 15 between them and escape. We can't fight through that many, Orin said. Wisteria appeared beside them with 3 other Harrow. They carried weapons that looked organic, grown rather than manufactured. There's another way. Service tunnels. We can reach your shuttle from below. Why didn't you mention this before? Talus demanded. Because they're watching. Always watching. If they knew we were helping you escape, they'd kill everyone immediately. They're trying to kill everyone now. Now you can fight back. Now you can see them. Wisteria gestured to a wall panel. Follow me. Quickly. Ryan didn't hesitate. He trusted his instinct. And his instinct said the Harrow had been waiting 19 days for someone who could see the truth. Wisteria opened a passage that led down into darkness. The survivors poured through. The tunnels were cramped and organic, pulsing with the same bioluminescence as the rest of the station. But here the light stuttered and dimmed, like the station itself was dying. Ryan brought up the rear, weapon ready. Behind them, renders shrieked and gave chase. They'll follow us. Ambassador Chin gasped, clutching her ribs. Let them, Ryan said. Tight corridors, limited approaches. This is better than fighting in the open. A render pushed into the tunnel entrance. Its massive body compressed impossibly to fit the narrow space. Ryan aimed for where its eyes should be and fired. The creature jerked back, ichor spraying. Keep moving, Wisteria called from ahead. The shuttle bay is 300 meters. They ran through the dying station's veins. More renders entered the tunnels behind them. The creatures were faster, gaining ground with every second. Ryan fired backward without looking, trusting his sense of timing and distance. He heard screams that meant he was hitting targets. The tunnel opened into a service bay beneath the main docking area. Their shuttle waited above, separated by a single level of station infrastructure, and between them and salvation, the Render Queen waited in the shadows. Ryan felt the Queen before he saw her. The air in the service bay was wrong, thick and heavy like breathing through wet cloth. His skin crawled with the sensation of being watched by something vast and ancient and hungry. The other survivors stumbled into the bay behind him and froze. The Queen wasn't hiding. She didn't need to. She filled half the bay with her bulk, a nightmare of segmented body parts and grasping limbs that seemed to exist in more dimensions than Ryan's eyes could process. Her carapace was scarred from centuries of survival, and clusters of eyes rotated independently to track each person who entered her domain. When she breathed, the sound was like wind through a graveyard. "Mother of stars," Orin whispered. The Queen's mandibles opened, and she spoke. The sound bypassed language, hitting directly in Ryan's mind like psychic feedback. Images flooded his consciousness, renders spreading across the galaxy before recorded history. Civilizations falling. Entire species consumed. Then the Great Purge, the unified effort to drive them to extinction. The Queen had survived by hiding, by adapting, by learning to fool the very technology meant to detect her kind. She'd been waiting thousands of years for the galaxy to forget. For defenses to rely on sensors instead of instinct. For species to become soft and dependent on machines. Now the feast could begin again. "There's no way past her," Talus said. Portions of his crystalline body were missing, sacrificed in the fighting above. "We need another route." Wisteria shook her head. "This is the only path to your shuttle. Everywhere else is sealed." The Queen moved forward slowly, savoring their fear. Behind the survivors, more renders entered the tunnel, cutting off retreat. They were trapped between the Queen and her offspring, prey in a kill box designed over 19 days of patient preparation. Ryan checked his ammunition. 2 magazines left. Maybe 60 rounds. Not nearly enough to kill something that size. Around him, the other survivors prepared for a final stand with whatever weapons they had left. Ambassador Chin clutched a piece of broken station wall like a club. One of the Harrow held a medical laser, useless against render biology, but better than nothing. "Listen to me," Ryan said quietly. "Everyone focus on the Queen. Don't look at your scanners. Don't trust your instruments. Use your eyes. Watch how she moves, where she puts her weight. Predators have patterns. They always do. We're not warriors," one of the diplomats sobbed. "We're negotiators. We talk. We don't fight. Then learn fast or die slow. Your choice." Harsh words, but Ryan had no time for gentle encouragement. The Queen was gathering herself for a charge. He could see it in the way her legs tensed, the way her eyes focused on the weakest targets first. She'd crush through the group, scatter them, let her offspring pick off the survivors one by one. Standard predator tactics. The same whether you were a lion hunting gazelles or a monster hunting diplomats. "When she charges, split left and right," Ryan ordered. "Don't run backward. She's faster than you. Move laterally. Make her choose which group to follow." "Why would we listen to tactical advice from a human?" one of the diplomats demanded. "Your species has been in space for less than a generation. Because my species survived 4 million years by running from things that wanted to eat us." Ryan snapped. "We're really good at not dying to predators. So shut up and listen." The Queen charged, Ryan dove right, firing as he moved. His shots sparked off her carapace, doing no real damage but getting her attention. Half the group went left as he'd ordered. The other half froze in panic, and the Queen plowed through them like a battering ram. Bodies flew. Screams echoed. But the survivors who'd moved were still alive. "Keep moving," Ryan shouted. "Circle around her. Don't let her focus on one target." Orin understood first. She began firing from the Queen's left flank, drawing one cluster of eyes her way. Talus charged from the right, his crystalline fists hammering at the joints in her legs. The Queen spun, trying to track multiple threats at once. Ryan watched her movement patterns. She favored her right side, compensating for an old injury that had never healed properly. When she turned left, there was a fraction of a second delay. A weakness. Hit her left side. Ryan called out. That's where she's vulnerable. The survivors coordinated without planning, instinct taking over where training failed. They'd all been prey animals once, millions of years ago in their species' evolution. Somewhere deep in their genetics, they remembered how to survive. The harrow struck with their organic blades. The crystal diplomat used his shattered body as a weapon. Even the floating gas being compressed herself into a battering ram and slammed into the queen's eye cluster. The queen shrieked and stumbled. Black ichor poured from a dozen wounds. She wasn't dying, but she was hurt, confused. The prey was fighting back in ways her ancient mind didn't expect. Ryan sprinted toward her injured side. A massive claw swept at him, and he slid under it, feeling the wind of its passage. He came up running and jumped, grabbing onto the ridges of her carapace. His fingers found purchase in the scars and cracks of 1,000 battles. He climbed. The queen thrashed, trying to shake him loose. Ryan held on with strength born of desperation. He reached her head, found the gap between armored plates, and jammed his weapon into the soft tissue beneath. He pulled the trigger and didn't stop until the magazine clicked empty. The queen's scream shook the entire station. She reared up, smashing her head against the ceiling. Ryan lost his grip and fell, hitting the ground hard enough to crack ribs. Through the pain, he watched the queen collapse. Her body hit the deck with a sound like a building falling. She twitched once, twice, then went still. Around the bay, her offspring froze. Without the queen's psychic control, they stood motionless, confused, leaderless, mortal. 3 months later, Ryan stood in a training facility on the council's central station and watched his students struggle with an exercise he'd designed. 20 recruits from 15 species, all security personnel who'd survived too many close calls with threats their scanners missed. They were learning to hunt without technology. Stop looking at your displays, Ryan called out. The target is right in front of you. A recruit from the mining colonies waved his scanner frantically at empty air. Sir, I'm detecting nothing in this sector, because it's cloaked. So stop scanning and start observing. Look for the tells. Disturbed airflow, light refraction, the feeling on your skin when something's watching you. The recruit looked doubtful, but lowered his scanner. He squinted at the space in front of him, really looked instead of relying on instruments. After a moment, his eyes widened. There, the dust particles are swirling around something. Good. Now track it. Don't lose visual contact. The cloaked training drone moved through the room. Ryan had commissioned them based on the render thread, objects that fooled sensors but remained visible to careful observation. His students tracked it with varying degrees of success. Learning to trust senses evolution had given them before technology made them lazy. Talus entered the training room, his crystalline body restored and reinforced after the Harrow Station incident. He watched the exercise with what Ryan had learned to recognize as approval in a species. Your methods are unconventional, Talus said, but effective. The Council has received reports of 12 other render nests discovered using observation-based protocols. All were eliminated before they could complete their traps. How many nests were missed before? Ryan asked. We're still finding them. Current estimates suggest renders infiltrated 47 stations and 17 colony worlds over the past decade. All deaths were attributed to technical failures or accidents. Ryan felt sick. Hundreds, maybe thousands dead because everyone trusted their scanners over their instincts. The renders had exploited the galaxy's dependence on technology, turning their greatest strength into their most critical vulnerability. The Council wants to expand your program, Talus continued. Every security team, every station, every colony will include personnel trained in organic threat assessment. Species with strong observational abilities will be fast-tracked for security positions, including humans, especially humans. Your species' evolutionary history prepared you for exactly this threat. For a million years of being hunted taught you to see what hunts you. Talus paused. I was wrong to dismiss your concerns on the Harrow Station. I apologize. Coming from Talus, that was significant. The commander had built a career on protocol and procedure. Admitting those systems had failed required reshaping his entire worldview. We both learned something, Ryan said. Technology is incredible, but it's a tool, not a replacement for awareness. Ambassador Chun arrived next, moving stiffly due to healing ribs, but otherwise recovered from her injuries. She'd spent the last 3 months testifying before various council committees about the render threat and the systematic blind spots in galactic security. The council just approved the organic threat doctrine, she announced. All sensor arrays will now include biological observation posts. No critical decision can rely solely on electronic verification. And they're establishing a new division to coordinate between technological and biological intelligence. Who's heading it? Ryan asked. Chun smiled. You are. Congratulations, Director Ryan. He blinked. I'm a field officer, not an administrator. You're the human who saw what an entire galaxy missed. That makes you qualified. She handed him a data tablet. Your division will include representatives from 60 species. You'll coordinate threat assessment, train personnel, and develop new protocols that combine technology with biological awareness. The Harrow have volunteered to share their experience surviving render occupation. Ryan looked at the tablet, scrolling through pages of organizational charts and budget allocations. A year ago, he'd been a security contractor hoping for a steady paycheck. Now, he was being handed responsibility for galactic security. What about field work? He asked. You'll still deploy when needed. But your real job is teaching others to see what you see. Chen's expression grew serious. The renders aren't the only threat that learn to hide from our sensors. There are probably dozens of species, ancient enemies, waiting for us to become complacent. You're going to help make sure that doesn't happen. Wisteria arrived with a delegation of Harrow. They'd recovered their station and were slowly healing from the trauma of their occupation. But they'd also become some of the strongest advocates for the new security protocols. We brought something for your training program, Wisteria said. She gestured, and her companions brought forward containers holding what looked like organic tissue samples. These are genetic markers from the Render Queen. Your scientists can use them to develop better detection methods. But more importantly, we've written a guide. Everything we learned about render behavior during our captivity. How they think, how they hunt, how they hide. Ryan accepted the gift with genuine gratitude. This will save lives. You saved ours. It's the least we can offer. Wisteria looked at the training recruits, still struggling to track the cloaked drone. You're teaching them well. The old ways and the new ways together. That became Ryan's motto as his division grew. Technology and biology working together. Neither superior to the other, both essential for survival. The galaxy had spent thousands of years believing advanced sensors made primitive awareness obsolete. The renders had proven otherwise. Now, across hundreds of worlds, security personnel learned to turn off their scanners and trust their eyes. They studied predator